And the aim of this session is to give you a rapid introduction to business planning using a tool called the Social Business Model Canvas. So by the end of the session, the idea is that you'll have the tools and knowledge that you need to put together a simple business plan that would lay the foundation for a social venture that could be a completely new standalone initiative, or could potentially be something that you're kind of developing and incubating within your own organizations. So a few kind of guidelines on the session and how it will run. Please turn your videos on if possible. Nice to see who's kind of participating and kind of emulating that in-person experience as much as possible, and we're quite a small group, which is nice. We'll be using the chat function throughout, so that's encouraged. So I'll be coming to you for kind of input on specific things at various points, but do also just chip in with comments throughout. It'd be good to hear how this is kind of going down. And then, as Gina has mentioned already, if you could just change your display name to your name and organization and your preferred pronouns, then that's just great. We can kind of see who's speaking and contributing at any particular time. And I will just share my screen now so I can get going with the presentation. And could somebody just give me a thumbs up that is coming through loud and clear? Okay, great, thank you very much. So yeah, please do interact with the FEA and or me on social media using the hashtag and the handles that you can see there. And the plan for the session is I'll start with an introduction to my background very briefly and to Year Here to set the context for the session. And I'll then take you through the Social Business Model Canvas tool, explaining why and how we use it. And I'll be getting you involved at various points to contribute your ideas and involve you in that process. And then we'll have a chance to ask, you'll have a chance to ask questions towards the end, and I'll do my best to answer as many of those as possible. And then we'll be closing with some final reflection on what you've got from the session and the next steps that you might take. So hopefully that all sounds good. So quick intro to me. So as Gina said, for my sins, I did train as an accountant in the corporate world before making the switch to social enterprise and investment a few years ago. And I managed the accelerator and impact investment programs at the Young Foundation, who you may be familiar with, for about 3 years, including an accelerator and a fund for education ventures called the Young Academy. And I've got a load of links that I'll drop in at the end. So I can send you some more information about that program and an impact report that we produced summarising the impact of ventures tackling different aspects of educational inequality. And that fund provided equity and debt investment for startups tackling educational inequality from various angles, and we supported a number of the ventures that were also incubated by Teach First and the Fair Education Alliance. So really happy to be involved in this Impact Festival again, as Gina said, now for the 5th year in a row, making me feel very old. I'm now interim CEO at Year Here, where I'm responsible for our incubation of social mission startups. And a quick overview of Year Here in case you don't know us. So we're a postgraduate course and incubator that builds scalable startups tackling social issues, including educational inequality, the housing crisis, health challenges, and various others. And we recruit people with solid professional experience, entrepreneurial zeal, and the ambition to tackle some of the UK's toughest social problems. And over the course of a very intensive and immersive year, our fellows volunteer in settings such as care homes, homeless hostels, and youth services, where they co-design sustainable new social enterprise solutions. And we also connect fellows with co-founders, their other kind of participants in the programme, and develop their social innovation and enterprise skills through our curriculum, which is taught by leading founders, policymakers, and impact investors. And so the graduates of the programme leave us with their own social business, up to £10,000 of seed capital, paying clients, and a programme of business support. And because our partners pay to be involved in our programme, there are no course fees for the fellows who are participating, and we offer financial support packages and bursaries and discounted accommodation to ensure that finances aren't a barrier to taking part. And we actually have applications open at the moment for our next cohort, which starts in September. And the deadline for that is the 2nd of May. So if you're interested, or if you know anyone who sounds like they might be up for joining Year Here, then check out our website. And I'll again drop in some links at the end and apply in the next 10 days or so if you're interested. So finally, just final point on Year Here. So over 40 social ventures have been born from the programme by our fellows who founded them at the end, and many of them work in education. So I've just picked out 4 that might be interesting for you. So Chatterbox is a global language learning platform where the tutors are refugees and asylum seekers. In Common is an intergenerational wellbeing programme that connects primary schools and retirement homes. Tranquility is an online platform that tracks pupil wellbeing, which has really taken off in the last year, given the challenges that schools have faced, kind of staying in touch with their students during the pandemic. And Critics Club delivers cultural programs which help young people to engage with the arts as critics. And do check out the full venture portfolio. Again, I'll drop a link at the end to see the full range of innovations and social enterprises that have been launched by our fellows, because there could be some really nice inspiration for your idea or new connections that you can make from seeing what they're working on. And Year Here is a really great place to come if you're an aspiring social entrepreneur, which might describe you, or you could be coming to this session from a different angle. So I don't know if everybody has managed to do this already, but just in case you haven't, it would be great to see in the chat who else is here, and I haven't had a chance to actually have a look at it myself, so I will also have a look. So if you haven't dropped in a kind of 10-word summary of who you are and what you do, that would be great to see, just to get a sense of what angle you're coming at the session from, and perhaps what you're looking to get out of it. So if you haven't done that already, please drop that into the chat and we'll have a scan through. So yeah, Nick, great to hear from Insight Outreach, great to have you here. Elle, thank you. Founder of Bridge, nice. Foundation Years Trust, great to have you. Anna Louise, thank you. Priya, Festival of the Child, yeah, great. Really nice to see everyone's backgrounds. Alison, hi, nice to meet you. Oh, a social media platform for education, that sounds cool. And please do keep, hi Tosin, Beyond Black, great, closing the gap between Black African Caribbean pupils and their peers. Amazing, great, great to have you all here. Please keep dropping those in so we can get a sense of who else is in the session. And you are actually going to get a chance now to find out a bit more about who else is here, because I know Gina and Emma have mentioned that people are really keen to build their networks through these sessions. So rather than diving straight into the content before we do, wanted to give you the chance to meet each other in small groups of kind of 2s or 3s. And so we'll have 10 minutes for this. And we've got some prompt questions there, which I think the FEA team will drop into the chat. But given this is a fair education focus session, maybe by way of introduction, you could let the others in your group know who your favourite teacher was at school and why. What brings you to this session? So maybe expanding a bit on what you've already dropped into the chat about where you are at the moment, what your background is and what you're looking to get out of it. And then any kind of burning questions that you'd most like this session to answer, and kind of comparing notes on the other people in your group to see if you have kind of shared challenges that you might be able to kind of discuss and take forward outside the session. So I will stop there and hand back to the FEA team to make the breakout room magic happen. Any instructions from you guys on what's going to happen?
Great, thanks, James. I think Emma's got them ready to go. She's written in the chat, so we will all disappear into small groups, and I'll look forward to seeing my group in a second.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a chance to get to know everyone else in the session a bit better, and I've also seen that our numbers have grown in that time, which is great. So I've got a few more people joining. I will just start sharing my screen again. So is that sharing all right, Emma? Awkward. Brill. Thank you. So let's get stuck into the main session then. So I want to make this a kind of two-way as far as it's possible. So throughout, I'll be asking for quick fire responses to various questions. And I'd like you to write your responses in the chat if you want to have a go, though it's not obligatory. And I won't be able to pick up on all of them probably, but I'll try and take my cue from them where I can. And I might ask you to come off mute and elaborate on a point that you've dropped into the chat, just to kind of hear your thoughts on it. So don't be shy. And obviously everyone is bringing really useful insight and experience to this session that we want to harness. So it's definitely not just about me kind of sharing my my background and experience. If you have questions that you'd like to ask me, obviously we're not a huge group, but I think it might make most sense for you to maybe make a note of them somewhere else, perhaps in a Word doc, to one side, and then at the end, depending on time, you could either paste them into the chat all in one go, so I've got them in one place to run through, or I might come to you to just kind of ask your question off mute, as it'll be nice to hear your voices too, and then I'll try and get through as many questions as there's time for. So, okay, on to business planning, which is what you all want to hear about. So this is aimed at people right at the start of an entrepreneurial journey. So you might have an idea for a new venture, or you might just be passionate about a particular issue in education and know that something new is needed, but you don't know how to start structuring your thoughts. And my suggestion, based on a few years of working with dozens of early stage entrepreneurs, is to start with the Social Business Model Canvas, which is a tool for designing and analysing and describing business models on just one page. So the idea is that by having everything on one page in a kind of highly visual format, it enables you to map out the key elements of your idea and in particular see how they relate to one another. So you're kind of thinking holistically about the idea right from the start, rather than perhaps just the kind of one dimension of it that you've started with. And this framework was inspired by two startup gurus and their methodologies, which I'll paste links to at the end of the session so you can do a bit more reading. But the first was Alex Osterwalder, who wrote a book called Business Model Generation, which created the original commercial version of the Business Model Canvas, which has been really kind of influential in kind of the commercial startup world in Silicon Valley, and which there is kind of a lot of literature out there about. And you may have a look at that as well and decide that the commercial version is actually quite a good fit for what you're interested in. This is the more kind of social purpose version of it. And the other is called Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And again, I'll share all the details of this at the end. But that's a philosophy of building businesses that emphasizes real-world testing over extensive planning. And the Young Foundation adapted the original business model canvas to create this social version as an open source tool. And it's since been adapted by other organizations. So you can find multiple versions of this online. This is just kind of one particular version of it I'll take you through today. And at the end, I'll paste a link in to the version that's closest to the one that I'll go through today on Stanford University's website. So you can then download it and start working with it yourselves. So just before we go into what it is and what it looks like, a couple of points on its purpose and how to use it. So Lean Startup, as I said, has been an influential theory of venture building over the last 10 to 15 years. And the key message is that you should spend more time building and testing out your products or services or programs than having your head in the business planning process itself. So you could spend a year writing the perfect business plan, or what you think is the perfect business plan, doing research online, crunching numbers, only to find that your assumptions were completely wrong and no one wants what you're offering when you launch it in the real world. So the actual business kind of falls flat when it comes into contact with reality. So Lean Startup is about prioritizing the building early on, testing something out, learning from the tests, and the sooner you can do that and keep doing it, the greater your chances are of building a sustainable venture. And of course, some planning is important to give you structure, but it's about keeping it proportionate and spending plenty of time on testing. And the canvas is, yes.
Sorry to jump in, just a quick question. The screen is white for me. Are there images up that we're supposed to see?
No, that's a good point. No, this is a bit of a long intro spiel.
Great, perfect. Just wanted to make sure. Saw your mouse. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it will. The slide will become much more interesting very soon, but good to flag that just in case. So the canvas is it's a really good tool for plotting out your idea and sharing it with other people to get feedback, as it will help people get their heads around your idea more quickly and build a shared understanding of what you're trying to do. So it should be a living, breathing document that evolves every time you get new information, not a static plan that you write just once. And you'll see in a second, it's very snappy and intuitive, but at some point you'll probably have to write something longer and more detailed. So if you were trying to raise investment, for instance, an investor probably would expect a longer document than just the business model canvas, but the canvas structure will give you the building blocks for a longer business plan, and you can just kind of rejig them and expand upon them. So let's dive in. The canvas is made of 10 boxes, each of which is a building block of your idea. And into each of those boxes, you would plot out the key points of that building block. So we'll start with the social value proposition, which is, we describe this as the heart of the canvas. So it's both in the middle, but it's about the thing, your kind of passion that drives you, and the mission of the venture. So here you would articulate the problem that you're solving or the need that you're meeting for your customer or beneficiary. And you could think of this as the impact that you're making in the world, or how the world might be different in, say, 3 years' time from when you started, if you're successful. So for you, the social value proposition might be improving career options for young people from less fortunate backgrounds. It might be enabling teaching assistants to better support the children that they work with. So it will obviously depend totally on what your idea is, but it's about the social impact you're trying to create. So focusing on that concept of value for a second, I want to come to you. So value is about how you meet a need or solve a problem for somebody. So briefly in the chat, if you could maybe share your thoughts on how an idea or a venture might create value. What might that mean in practice or look like? Where do kind of customers or beneficiaries of an idea derive that sense of value from? What might that mean? Any ideas you've got, just drop them in the chat and we'll see what's coming through. So I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, thank you, Priya. So improving the lives of the beneficiary group in some way, absolutely. So kind of positive improvement is at the heart of social value that you might be creating. And Abigail has then kind of taken that more specific, which is great. So for what you're doing, that might mean an improvement in skills or abilities or attitudes. And yeah, value from a mindset shift or a practical strategy. Exactly. So if people kind of interact with you and then come out kind of feeling differently about themselves or the world around them. So yeah, those are some great ideas there. Thank you. So there's different kind of ways that value might be created that I made a few notes on before. So it might be that you're creating something completely new that just doesn't exist elsewhere in the world, and the world needs it and wants it. And you're providing something that is kind of plugging a gap. It could be that you're creating something that is similar to something that already exists, but it's just better, or it's an improvement in some way. So you found a better way to deliver a product or service or meet a need. It could be something that perhaps you've customized better to a particular group. So there's something that's already available out there in the sector, but you've thought about how it could meet the needs of a particular group of, say, students or teachers, and so they get more benefit from it because of the way you've approached it. It could just be cheaper, so it could be something that already exists, but it's more affordable, so it's more accessible to people. More people can benefit from it. So just the point there, I guess, is there's different ways that an idea can create value. So really interrogate the impact that you're making and how you're doing that. So it's not just about something that's kind of shiny and new that doesn't already exist. It could just be that it's different in some way and distinctive and effective at solving a problem. And a tool to help you flesh out your social value proposition, which some of you I'm sure have heard of, is the theory of change model. So do look that up if you don't know it already. There's some really great resources online. And it's a technique for mapping out how a product or service has an impact on the people it's designed to benefit. And also fitting under here would be impact measurement tools, which are ways of gathering data or feedback that would tell you if you're succeeding in your mission or not. So theory of change and impact measurement are a couple of things to help you flesh out the social value proposition. And then the right-hand side of the canvas is the market section. And that's all of the external or outward facing dimensions of your idea. And the first box we'll explore here is customers. So with social ventures, you might need to distinguish customers from beneficiaries. And beneficiaries are people who benefit from your work, and customers are people who pay for it. So sometimes they're the same. For instance, if you had, say, teachers paying to join an online community of other teachers to support each other, the teacher is benefiting directly from that solution, and they're also paying for that benefit. But often they might be different. So for instance, parents subscribing to an app that helps their children practice maths, for instance, the customer is the parent and the beneficiary is the child. So that might have implications for how you engage those different groups. So for instance, for the parents, you're trying to get them to part with their money for this thing. And for the children, you're trying to create an app that they'll want to use and keep coming back to. So you might essentially be selling or appealing to two very different audiences there, and you wouldn't want to kind of conflate those with your strategy. And in the education system, there are many possible customers and beneficiaries. And in particular, if you're looking to work with schools, really important to be clear on who benefits from your work and where the budget for that sits, so that your proposition can be really well targeted to the decision maker. And on top of this, it's likely you'd need to segment your customers and beneficiaries, as they won't all be identical. So you might segment them on the basis of certain characteristics, such as differing needs or geographical location or size of school, perhaps how you reach them. Some of them you're going to reach in a particular way versus others. So that's the first box on the external facing side of the canvas. And now we're going to jump over to the other side, which is called implementation. And here we map out all of the internal dimensions of your venture and how you create the social value in the middle, essentially. And the first box there is delivery. So this is the activities that you carry out and the resources that you have in order to carry them out. So the kinds of activities and resources that could fit into this section might be training materials. So your kind of activity is delivering training, and you've got really good practice training materials that you use to do that. It could be a platform that you've created to connect people. And then to carry out those activities, the resources you might have could be your team. So maybe you have an expert in child development who you work with. It could be funds, cash, basically. So maybe you've got some startup funding for your development work. It could be a technology asset. So maybe an algorithm you've developed to analyze data sets or something like that. It could even be something intangible, an intangible resource like a cool brand that you've come up with. And that's part of what makes you kind of distinctive and special, and the reason that people would come to you. So list out here all of the things that you do and the resources that you can draw on to create your social value. And just a tip here on pitching. So I think the best elevator pitches for a new idea combine the what and the how, which is the delivery side, with the why, which is the social value proposition. And combining those two snappily can be a really powerful way of conveying your idea to people who might be interested. So you're kind of saying, we achieve this social impact by delivering this activity. And I'm a trustee of an education charity called Smart School Councils. I was just looking at their website before for something else, and their kind of one-liner is that they give schools easy to use digital tools to involve every pupil in decision-making, social action, and developing key skills for life. So you get a sense in that one sentence of what they're trying to do with their mission and how they're doing it. So at this point, I want to pause and come to you to hear what the kind of one-line summary of your idea might be in that format, if you can. Maybe it's already in that format where you're kind of covering, here's what we're trying to do and here's how we do it. But I will come to the group, and there is a raise hand function in Zoom, which hopefully people know how to use. We could do that. So I'll just stop sharing my screen. But if anyone would like to raise their hand and just share with the group their kind of mission and how they're hoping to achieve that, it'd be great to hear some of your ideas. Would anyone like to? Okay, Alison, great. You've done the real life raising hand. That worked perfectly for me.
Yeah. It's not so techy, which is a bit weird considering I'm doing social media. So the purpose of the platform is a space where schools can celebrate what they do well, connect, collaborate, and grow together so that every school becomes a great school rather than, so every school becomes a great school. That's it.
Great, thank you. And in terms of kind of activities and resources, so obviously you described it as a platform, are there any particular features or things it will do that you think will enable that mission?
Yeah, so it's a really complex site. So each school and each educator can have a profile page where they upload short videos, no more than 2 minutes long, of the 3 things that they do best. And by doing that, they're saying to other schools, 1, we're really proud of what we do without external validation, and 2, we're willing to support and share what we're doing with other schools. Then there are also community rooms where you can have bespoke conversations about whatever it is you need support on. So yeah, and it's also a space where you can ask for help without feeling embarrassed about asking for help.
Amazing, great, yeah. Awesome, thank you for sharing that. Would anyone else like to share their initiative or what they're working on? Raise your real life or virtual hand.
I don't mind having a go. So basically what I'm working on is an app, a gamified cultural education app that is tackling unconscious bias and breaking down cultural stereotypes through first-hand photography and augmented reality, working with young people.
Oh, amazing. That sounds really exciting. And you've already kind of got it in a sort of 1-sentence structure that you could play around with a bit, I guess, to to kind of get that across as clearly as possible. Great, thank you, Elle. Maybe one more volunteer from the group, if anybody would like to share. Yeah, Abigail, over to you.
Hi, I just wrote something really quickly with the one hand I've got free. And it helped because I just spelt it out for me rather than how I would market it. But I just put injecting the fun, creativity, passion and life experiences into writing in order to bridge the literacy gap.
Nice, great. Yeah, that's good. It's very snappy and kind of to the point, combining what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So that's great. Thank you. And nice to see that festival goers at the FEA are getting younger and younger. Start them young. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, great. So yeah, do kind of bear that in mind of, I guess, as you're going to be going out there into the world and talking about what you're doing, that you want to kind of give people a really crystal clear sense of what that is, and you can convey that really snappily to kind of get them on board or get their support in some way. So I will just share my screen again to pick up where we were. So we'll come now to the bottom of the canvas. So the kind of 4th main section is the finance section. And the first box that I'll cover there is revenue. So the finance boxes are obviously too small to put in any kind of meaningful numbers. They're really for kind of bullet point summaries, and behind the scenes you would probably have a financial model sitting behind them with some kind of calculations. But the revenue box summarizes how the customers on the right hand side are willing to part with money for you to carry out the activities on the left hand side to make the difference that you're trying to make with your mission in the middle. So you can kind of start to see how the different components of the canvas fit together. And now I want to just come to you again in the chat for your thoughts on what some income models might be. What are those different ways of generating revenue for your venture? So any kind of business models you're aware of, just drop them into the chat, and then I will just share my thoughts on a few quite common ones. So just give you 10, 15 seconds. Subscription, yeah, thanks, El, that's a good one. Membership, yeah, Alison, which might kind of be a sort of similar approach to subscription. Adverts, yeah, advertising revenue, definitely. Good point from Gina. Who would pay? Who wants the benefit from the value they get through the subscription? State funding, exactly. So thanks, Kerry. So you might be kind of commissioned by a state body through a contract. So I guess through a school or a local authority. Partnership fees, Laura's got a load there, amazing. Sponsorship, media, advertising, sales, fundraising through grants. Brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, so a few, I think most of the ideas I had have been covered there. So selling your products or services to a customer, which in your case might be at school, could be a local authority, multi-academy trust, lots of different kind of options there. Subscription fees, where you've got someone paying a recurring kind of membership fee to join your kind of platform or have access to your product. Advertising is one where you might be able to, that might enable you to offer a service for free but generate income because advertisers are kind of getting eyeballs on their products or services. Grant funding, another one where you're kind of funded philanthropically, perhaps because there's no obvious paying customer, or it's not kind of practical or possible to have a kind of paying customer relationship. So there's lots of different ways that those income streams and business models, lots of forms they could take, and they might develop over time as well. So in the early stages, when you're testing out your idea, you might be applying for grants before you've proven that what you're doing can work or that there is social value in it. So that's where grant funders often play a really important role in kind of backing and taking a punt on new ideas and testing them out. But once you've proven it can work, customers might be more willing to pay for a product or service on a recurring basis. Over time as well, you might diversify your offer into multiple income streams, and that can be really helpful for social enterprises in particular to minimize risk and not become too dependent on one source of income that might kind of dry up if there's a kind of change in government policy or something. So one to think about in the longer term is what multiple revenue streams and a kind of diversified income base might look like. And then the left-hand side, on the implementation side of the finance section, is the cost of delivery. So here you should plot out the main types of costs that your idea will incur. And there are two kind of main cost types, really. So some that will go up and down with the amount of revenue that you earn, such as workshop materials. So the more workshops that you deliver, the more materials you'll need to buy. And those are called variable costs. And in contrast, some will stay the same no matter how much revenue you earn. So for instance, rent on an office, whether you sell 100 workshops in a month or one workshop in a month, the rent for the office space would be the same. And those are called fixed costs. And it's important to have a really good understanding of the costs involved in the delivery of your product or service to help you build a sustainable venture. And then in the middle is surplus for a more kind of social or charitable venture, or profit for a more commercial venture. And hopefully the income side is bigger than the cost side and you have some money left over, though of course it can take a really long time to reach profitability. And once you get there, there are options for how you would reinvest that surplus. And you know, looking across all the different possibilities on the canvas, you might reinvest it in expanding the kind of activities that you do. So developing, say, a digital version of something that you currently do manually or in person, or you might invest it in your customer base by trying to reach new customers or beneficiaries. And there are kind of creative ways that I've seen over the years of ventures trying to boost the profitability of their venture, perhaps with different versions of their product or service for different audiences or markets. So smart school councils, who I mentioned before, for instance, they have a differentiated pricing model. So they charge more to independent and international schools, who make up quite a chunk of their membership base, and that allows them to charge more affordable rates to state schools, for instance. There's also another venture I worked with at the Young Foundation that delivered leadership training for girls in secondary school, but they also had a corporate training program with a higher margin that enabled them to cross-subsidize the fees for their schoolwork. So get really creative in thinking about what the options might be to improve your financial sustainability. And then the legal form of a social venture can really affect the options available here for what you do with the profit that you generate. So back to you for this. What are some legal forms, also called forms of incorporation, that you could adopt to take your venture forward? So please drop any thoughts that you have on legal forms into the chat. I'll give you 10 or 15 seconds to share any that you know.
And James, you have a question around the time frame for calculating costs, perhaps useful to consider within the legal structures as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, sorry, I've just managed to bring up the question box. So I can take a couple of those while you're dropping your ideas in. So is grants or philanthropic funding sustainable in the long term? And that you might move to a different income model in the longer term. Yeah, I think there are challenges with that kind of fully grant-based model, perhaps because you become slightly dependent on the priorities or possibly whims of funders or donors. So if a grant funder that provides lots of funding for you changes its strategy and their priorities change, they may no longer fund an initiative like yours. And if you don't have another income source to support you, then that could present a risk. And on the question about time frame for calculating costs, I think there's two different ways you could look at this. You could look at so kind of mapping it out as a forecast almost. So month by month, what costs am I going to be incurring in order to deliver what I want to do, and therefore how much income do I need to bring in to cover those costs. On the other hand, you could also do it on almost imagining that the venture is up and running and you've got a target income that you're looking to charge a school, for instance, and target costs that you're looking to deliver it for. And that more kind of financial modeling approach can help you understand whether it could actually be sustainable in the long term. So you perhaps get some intel that schools have a budget of up to this much for a program like yours, but you've worked out that it's going to cost you twice as much to deliver it. So you know right from the start that grants or some form of subsidy is going to be a really important part of your strategy. So it's good to kind of figure that out with some basic financial modeling in the early days, because that might inform your financial strategy. So hopefully that's clear. There's kind of two approaches. One is like a real-time kind of forecast of when is money going to be coming in and out. And another would be to look at it on a kind of standalone basis to work out if the unit economics of the idea stack up. Community interest company, charity, yeah, company limited by guarantee. And then interesting one on B Corps and cooperatives. So just to give you, I won't go into loads of detail on governance structures, but you've got on the sort of different options for how you incorporate, and social enterprise is an umbrella term that could refer to several different legal forms. At one end, you would have a company limited by shares, which is the structure that most commercial companies adopt, but some social enterprises also do too. And they might kind of indicate their social or environmental responsibility by additionally getting a B Corp certification. So B Corps are not, a B Corp isn't a legal form, it's a kind of a certification for companies to say that they're adhering to certain principles. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have charities who are regulated by the Charity Commission, and they have to kind of demonstrate that they meet a test of the public benefit that they create. And then in the middle, on the kind of spectrum of social enterprise, you have companies limited by guarantee, as Laura has said, which is a not-for-profit company structure. You might also have a community interest company, which is an organization that has primarily social objectives, but the surpluses that they generate through their business might need to be reinvested into the business, so they're not being extracted to kind of pay dividends to shareholders, for instance. There's also a kind of light touch version of a charity called a charitable incorporated organization, or CIO, which is the same principles as a charity apply, but there's a bit less regulation. So it's kind of quicker and easier to incorporate it than going for full charity status. And at the end, I'll share a link to a really great guide to different legal forms for social enterprises that will hopefully give you a bit more information to do your research on this if you haven't started yet. Okay, so back to the canvas, and the next section over on the right hand side in the market section is called macroeconomic environment. And these are the big factors and forces in the world that influence the prospects of your idea, because they have an effect on your customers' buying decisions and your beneficiaries' needs. And obviously there's rather a lot going on in the general macroeconomic environment at the moment. It hasn't been a quiet couple of years, and in the education sector specifically too. So let's start with macro trends. So these are things that affect all sectors, regardless of industry. What are some of the kind of big macro trends going on at the moment in the world? Please drop your thoughts into the chat. I'll just give you 10 seconds. And I have a feeling that there are a few ideas that I have a feeling will already be coming through. Just give you a few seconds to drop those in. Yeah, online learning, exactly, huge shift towards that, accelerated by the pandemic, big kind of technological change. Give you a few more seconds for any other ideas. Yeah, local shopping, people kind of thinking a bit more locally, for sure, about where they buy their products and services. Yeah, Anna Louise, definitely that's a kind of education specific one there. Increased fear about the attainment gap, growing social inequality, automation. Yeah, great, some great stuff coming through there. So yeah, a few I'd kind of jotted down would be from recent history, you know, Brexit, particularly if you're kind of procuring sort of materials or something, or you have any kind of international dimension to what you're doing. COVID obviously has been, you know, triggered huge societal and economic shifts. Economic recession would be something that would show up here, the current government and kind of political climate. And then coming on to education, so already had that point about the attainment gap and kind of COVID specific consequences of for the education sector. Any other things going on in education at the moment that if you were launching an education venture, you'd want to be aware of and taking account of? So perhaps some kind of policy change. Give you 10 seconds or so to drop any thoughts on that. So academization, yeah, as a growing trend. Thanks, Gina. Further squeezing of school budgets, yeah, sadly. The development of the global curriculum. Oh, that's an interesting one. Alison, could you expand? Would you mind expanding on that one, just to share your thinking?
I think that there's a recognition that the curriculum we've got at the moment was fit for purpose a long time ago, and it's no longer preparing young people for the world that they're going to be working in. And I think that one of the things we've realised is that it's much easier to develop a global curriculum now than before. So it's coming together and looking at what works well, because we know that our children are going to be working internationally rather than in small communities.
Great, yeah, thank you, lovely. And yeah, Kerry chipping in there with a related point about pressures from OECD and emphasis on attainment and tests. Exactly, all of that stuff is happening. So I guess this one is about being very mindful and really understanding the context in which you're developing your idea and what the implications of that might be for the audiences that you're looking to engage as beneficiaries or customers. And a couple I'd noted down there would be some of the knock-on effects of COVID. So, you know, teachers grading exams, recent structural changes in the education sector, so that increasing shift towards academy structures, what that might mean for trying to engage schools with your program, perhaps approaching a multi-academy trust centrally rather than approaching schools on a school-by-school basis, changes to the assessment framework, all that kind of thing. So it is very important to be aware of those factors, because they will determine your customers' priorities and the pressures that they're under. They might be kind of creating problems that you can help them to solve. So really do your research on that before you talk to them. And a couple of useful tools are one that you might have heard of called PESTEL, P-E-S-T-E-L. And I was just going to drop what that means in the chat. So that stands for political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. So many of those big kind of macro trends can be grouped under those headings. And then another useful, very simple kind of classic tool here would be a SWOT analysis. So my idea, my venture or initiative, what are its strengths and weaknesses in relation to this environment that it's operating in, and what opportunities or threats does that environment present to me? And then the final piece of the puzzle on the right hand side is competitors. So what are other organizations that you are that are competing for the attention and budget of your potential customers doing? And understanding that will help you identify gaps and develop your USP. And an interesting counterpoint to that on the other side is partners. So these are suppliers or other organizations you can work with that can help you to deliver your mission, particularly where it doesn't make sense for you to do things in-house. So really try and understand the sector that you're in, where your idea can add the most value given what else is out there, and where you can't add that value or where it doesn't make sense, who else could you work with to achieve your mission efficiently and cost effectively? So for instance, if you're setting up an online presence, it wouldn't make sense to recruit a developer in-house, for instance, to build your website. You want to be focusing on building the core mission of your organization at that stage. So you'd be looking to work with an agency as a partner in doing that with you. And instead of approaching schools directly yourself, is there another organization already working in schools that you want to work with that could help introduce you to them? So kind of piggybacking on that infrastructure. And that link to competitors is interesting because there might be organizations that you initially see as competitors that end up being close partners by working together, so sharing contacts or resources. And then the final box is sales and marketing, which is about your means of reaching the market over on the right-hand side. It's on the left-hand side, on the implementation side, because those are internal functions of your organization that you can control and design, even though they're about reaching the external market, and they also have costs for you. So final question that I'm throwing over to you, what kind of methods or channels might you use to reach your customers? What are some classic like marketing channels or approaches that you might be using here? I'll give you another 10 seconds to add some thoughts into the chat on that, on marketing channels. Word of mouth, yeah, for sure. Thanks, Anna Louise. I have definitely also heard that the education sector is very powerful. So one way that you might want to make the most of that is asking schools that you're already working with to be an advocate for what you're doing and kind of talk to other schools in their area or in their network. We've got social media, direct mail, teacher radio, yeah, peer-to-peer stuff, building on your reputation, podcasts, amazing. Loads of really good ideas in there. Don't forget to check the chat afterwards to give you some inspiration. And they pretty much cover all the ideas I had as well. So that's the social business model canvas in a nutshell. And I alluded to this at the start about the different ways to use it. So I'm just going to wrap up by saying a few more things on that. So putting this into practice, so we've kind of covered the theory. How can you take this forward to support the development of your idea? So internally, it can be a very, very powerful planning and development tool. So you might want to, after this session, map out the current state of your idea into this framework to help you see the idea in the round. And often entrepreneurs have some real light bulb moments at this point when they plot it out on the canvas, because it can help you to identify areas of strength or weakness, spot threats or gaps in your thinking, identify new opportunities you haven't spotted. And a really common trend that I've seen is the partners box, for instance. People don't tend to think about partners early on when they're developing an idea. They're thinking, how can I change everything and solve this problem? But that forces you to consider the role of partners in doing that early on, which I think is really important. And then you could, for instance, plot out your target future state on a separate canvas. So, you know, current state is where you are now, target future state is where you'd like to get to. And that then enables you to develop a plan for how you progress from one to the other. And it might help you prioritize, well, okay, across all of these different dimensions of my idea, what am I going to do first? And And then you might spot interdependencies as well. So you think, well, I can't do this until I've figured this bit out. So you can do it as a kind of planning exercise. And I've also seen it used really effectively as a team building tool. So a really effective way to get ideas and kind of innovation from your team, or maybe advisors that you're working with. It's a very kind of visual, intuitive way to involve them in that process. So you might have a kind of strategy day, and you use the business model canvas to get everybody's ideas down about what you're doing and what you could potentially do differently in future. But it shouldn't be the limit of your planning, as I said before. So if you were considering a huge strategic decision, you'd probably write a short paper and lay out the options in a bit more detail, rather than just using a social business model canvas. So it should be used alongside other planning tools. And then externally, you might want to show it to funders and investors, perhaps attach it to a funding application. And I think, having been on the investor side of that before, an applicant including a business model canvas, I think, is really reassuring, because it demonstrates rigor and holistic thinking. And it can help to get buy-in and feedback from funders, perhaps in the earlier stages. So you could use it as a tool to get them to sort of feed into your idea. You could also use it with potential partners and customers. So kind of lifting up the bonnet on your idea and the evolving state that it's in, that could prove to be a really powerful idea generation or kind of innovation tool, and make those conversations easier. But again, as I said, just a caveat, funders and investors in particular would almost always expect a bit more detail. So you'd probably have to fill in a detailed application form or go through a business planning exercise. But the business model canvas gives you the headings and the structure that you can just lift, take your kind of bullet points as they stand, and then you've got a kind of longer document structure that you can just flesh out into more of a narrative. And then a final thought from me on next steps if you're thinking of getting going. So I'd encourage you to download a template of the canvas from the internet via the link that I share, or just sketch out your own using these slides on a big sheet of paper, or in a Jamboard or Miro board or something, and get down as much as you can into that template. Just kind of download all of your thoughts, get it all down, visualize it on the canvas. And then as a next step, you could identify which of the assumptions that you've made about your idea are the riskiest or kind of least tested, and then work out a way to research and test those assumptions as quickly as possible. Then you would learn from those tests, revise your assumptions and test again, and so on. And that's a really great way to start exploring and developing a new venture. And that approach, some of you might be familiar with and recognize it, is called Lean Startup. And there's a really great book, the original book by Eric Ries, who I mentioned before, that sets out that methodology. And that's based on developing a business through a series of iterations, so that the development process is really efficient and responsive to feedback, and no effort is wasted. Hence it's called Lean. So you move through that development loop from the original idea that you build into where it says code. That would be if it was a tech-based thing, but the product or service, you deliver that to some pilot customers, measure their interaction with it and the value it creates for them, generate some data that you analyze and you learn from that, and then you kind of go through another cycle to create an improved version of the idea. So as I said at the beginning, the goal is to prevent getting bogged down in a detailed business plan straight away, and to get testing. And every time you test something out and learn a bit more, you can update your social business model canvas so it's a living, breathing document. And you might have old versions that you keep that kind of demonstrate the progress that you've made. You might create multiple versions that show different future scenarios you might be aiming for to help with scenario planning. So it's hopefully will prove to be a really kind of dynamic and useful tool. And I'm now going to drop links to all the different kind of resources and things that I have mentioned into the chat. And I think we're probably going to have just over 5 minutes for questions as well. So I think anything that I haven't covered so far, I don't think there's too many of us that we can't just, you could maybe just come off mute and fire away with your question. So yeah, over to you. Don't tell me I've covered everything. That can't be possible. Were there any questions in the chat from before that I didn't get to?
You got them all, James, I think.
I got them. Okay, that's good. Yeah, any other questions? Any kind of burning questions? Could be something specific in relation to your idea. It doesn't have to be general we do have a few minutes before we wrap this section up.
Great.
Kerry.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for this. This is amazing. I've got a question around social value proposition when you have quite a lot of options for your social value proposition, and how disciplined do you think you need to be in honing in on that, I guess? Is that a good enough question? Do you get what I'm saying? I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question. Anything specific that you're grappling with at the moment?
Okay, so I'm very specifically, yeah, I'm helping an organisation who's very early startup think about how they can incorporate young people into urban regeneration processes. Now, obviously, I don't want to say too much, but there's obviously, okay, who are the young people that we're going to be working with? Do we want a community cohesion thing? Are we trying to topple, the planning power systems that exist? Anyway, I guess I'm thinking when there can be so much benefit from a particular project, what's your view on how you don't try and boil the ocean?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm sure it's something lots of people would also be grappling with. I would say if you haven't done a theory of change exercise yet, that can be a really, really effective way of just trying to kind of focus and narrow down a bit and break that down. And what that would encourage you to do is you might have your ultimate kind of impact statement. So this is the kind of change the world bit, but then identifying underneath that what the specific outcomes would be that support that change. So social impact is obviously a bit of a kind of ethereal, big concept, but there will be specific changes that will have happened in the world that would tell you you'd achieved that. So changes in the environment or in people's kind of behaviors or development of skills or whatever. So if you can try and pinpoint underneath that, the next layer down, what specifically is happening, you then sort of map back to say, well, this activity will lead to this outcome specifically if I do it enough over a particular period of time. And right at the early stages, you might have a comprehensive theory of change for the idea as you envisage it when it's fully up and running. But for now you think, okay, the thing I'm going to test is this strand. I want to increase young people's sense of agency that they can play a role in regeneration in their area or something. So I'm not going to worry about the other stuff, but I'm just going to see if this workshop approach or this activity might lead to that outcome, and then try and capture some basic kind of impact data from a small scale trial. So you might focus on one sub outcome of your overall impact just to kind of make some progress, because I think it can be quite paralyzing at the start to think, oh, where do I begin with this? So try and break it down, go through a theory of change exercise and start small would be my initial thoughts on that. I don't know if that's helpful.
Great steer. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Probably time for one more question if anyone wanted to.
Hi, can I ask a quick one? Sorry, my camera's not on. I've got a bit of a dodgy connection. We've been, effectively, we've been testing out the model of way we work with nurseries to support parents on the home learning environment for about 3 years now. And then actually just before lockdown, I was at the stage where I found myself back again because I had a year when I couldn't think about it at all because we were coping. Yeah. But the question of, the schools are very broke customers. they're always skint, and we'd be moving from a model where we've had funding from trusts and foundations for several years now to effectively to develop it and test it. So with schools locally, we'd be trying to move to a model where at least initially they were started contributing to costs, right? So through exactly the kind of cost model you were talking about. And I was just wondering if you've had any experience of this kind of moving. We're a charity, right? So moving from our status of a charity whereby, yes, at the end, the outcomes ultimately are on the children, but the school has effectively been receiving the service for free. But we'd then be in order to kind of diversify our income slightly, I need to start bringing money in, and we need to start charging for what we do. But it's a big step, isn't it? And it's a big step for a client like a school to go, okay, but I just had this free for 3 years, and now you're going to charge. And we were talking, I would start very small. Yeah, I mean, literally just covering staff costs, which are not that great for a few hours here and there. But then there's everything else as well, you know?
Yeah. Definitely. Oh gosh, this is going to be another common issue, I would guess, and definitely FEA team chip in if you can think of any other kind of examples that spring to mind. I am trying to think of organisations that have done this, and I think it can be tricky, like you say, to move from that free service to something that they're suddenly having to start paying for that they weren't budgeting for. On the other hand, I have kind of heard from people sort of setting things up in the education sector that sometimes schools paying for something will increase their kind of buy-in and participation in it. So it's in a way the customer sort of takes it a bit more seriously because they're having to pay for it. So there might be benefits of that if you've ever had sort of low sort of uptake or engagement from a school. I think starting small is sensible. I think probably being open with them about the fact that potentially the work might not be able to continue at all if you can't find a way to generate some income from them, because if you're, you know, if the grant funding isn't there to cover the cost, then you might just have to sort of shut up shop. So maybe taking it to them as a kind of how could we look at this differently? What other problems could I help you solve, or are there other budgets that kind of relate to this area where some funding could be kind of channeled in? I'll keep thinking, but I don't know, Gina or Emma, got any thoughts, or maybe others in the group?
I think let's open it up if anybody else has other ideas. I thought your suggestions were really great, James.
When I was a head teacher, we'd often, I mean, it wasn't unusual. What's happening to you isn't that unusual. And so I became quite used to people saying, this is working really well, but we can't afford it anymore. And we would think creatively about how to use some of the grants. So there are quite a lot of grants around EYFS, and working with schools so that they can see that you're not really trying to, that your intentions remain the same, your vision is the same, but just thinking about, so you support the school in finding the fund or identifying the fund, and the way in which they then present it to their governments to approve it.
That's a good point, actually. I mean, there could be sources of funding that the school themselves has access to that as a charity we don't. So that partnership approach to it could actually be, and I think you're right as well. I mean, it's like James was saying, just be completely open about it, because nothing has changed apart from the fact that funding is more scarce, particularly now. I think there's a lot more competition in the world of trusts and foundations for those kind of resources. So, but yeah, no, it's a valid point, actually. Yeah.
But actually, there's more money for EYFS than before. So EYFS and mental health are the two critical things at the moment. So you're more likely to be able to identify sources which you won't be able to access. The school certainly could. Yeah.
No, thanks.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that. And I'll bring the questions to a close here. And I was thinking, maybe Gina and Emma, as a sort of change of format, we could, given that there's not loads of us, we could do a quick round of everybody together in the room to kind of share a reflection. That might be a nice way to close it off. So I will just put my screen back up just because I had a couple of kind of prompt thoughts. Or actually, maybe I could drop these. Or Emma, would you mind transferring these to the chat? Maybe then I can take the screen off and we can see each other better. So maybe if we just go round and share, did you have any light bulb moments in the session? Hopefully you had one or two, but just anything that kind of changed your thinking, and then what actions you might take in relation to your idea next. And hopefully we'll have time to just quickly go around everybody if you just share a sort of quick snippet. So maybe if I start with Abigail, maybe, and then when you've done, pass to somebody else on the call whose name you can see. So yeah, any light bulbs that went on and or an action that you'll take as a result of the session today.
Okay, it's made me think a lot deeper about revenue and who is going to pay for what I offer. That has been on my mind because I am in the idea stage, but the ideas put forward have given me something to think about.
Great. And then nominate, do you want to nominate someone else?
Oh, nominate someone, sorry, I missed that bit. Okay, I'm going to nominate Alison Creel.
Yes, that's me. Hi. I think my main action is going to be having a look at the social business model canvas. I've not done it, but it speaks to me, so I think I might even perversely enjoy doing it. I've spent quite a lot of time working out how to monetize the platform, and I think that today's session has confirmed that I'm doing the right thing. So it's still scary as hell, but I think that it's the right thing to be doing. And there's still a dilemma because half the platform is going to be a free service, and the free service will generate the monetization, but it's chicken and egg. But there's still a real fear around the free, whether or not the free bit is going to work, given that people invest differently when it's free.
Great, thank you. And someone else in the group you want to nominate?
Kerry.
Thank you, Alison. Light bulb moments for me is just watching the canvas unfold. I was like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, good. So it was all kind of very validating, and I'm finding my notes very satisfying to look at on a page. So thank you for introducing me to this model. I think it's going to help a lot. What actions will I take in relation to my idea? Well, I am planning a workshop with some of the key collaborators and sort of stakeholders on this idea, and I think this is going to be something that I will use in that workshop. And also I'm going to be doing some interviews with them, and I think some of these questions are going to be really helpful in helping hone and shape exactly what and why and how. So thank you. And I would like to nominate Priya.
Well, I think it's been absolutely brilliant and so insightful. So thank you, James, so much. I really liked actually everything you said, but I liked what you said about interrogating the impact. And I'm going to be thinking about the specific changes of my idea for the environment and behaviours and the development of skills. And I just think that the model is brilliant. I do actually have that business model generation book, which I thought was great, but I just didn't quite exactly know how to interface with it. So you've made this much more meaningful, you know, for what I'm really focusing on. So thank you so much. It's been really fantastic. And I'm going to nominate Payman.
Okay, sorry, did you call me? Okay, well, I learned a few things. Most of it was based on the Canvas model. I've never done the Canvas model of business plan. I've done other business plan models. But I feel it's very approachable and easy to do rather than the lengthy things that I've been used to or learned years ago at school. But for the most part, my action plan is basically applying to basically for grants and things like that to see who would be interested, because most of my ideas are grant-based and things like that, as opposed to something I can take and start selling. So that would be my thing, is to go more for grants.
Great, thank you. And shall we wrap up coming to maybe Anna Louise and then Elle for the final word? Annalise, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think like lots of other people, I've not seen that model before, although I've had every single one of those thought processes. But what I like about it is it's a perfect way to just really visually bring all those thoughts together as well. So I'm definitely going to use it as I move forward with this. But I think the other thing you mentioned is that, which I hadn't thought of doing, and it's really simple and really smart idea, is just to do it and slam it on the back of an application form to grant makers as well, because most of my donors want to know that we're looking at other ways to get money, and we're not going to be relying on them forever. And actually, as a one-pager, it's really effective. So I'm definitely going to do that.
Great, thanks. And Elle, over to you.
Yeah, I think much the same as everyone else. I've done like a canvas model, but maybe not with the social impact sort of add on to it. And behind my laptop, there's like 1,000 post-it notes. So I need to kind of actually put that into a one-page document that will make it much easier to kind of, I think for every application or investment, it's just good to have something you can just draw things from really quickly. But yeah, particularly like the partnerships section, I'd never really thought about that. As you say, you kind of feel like you need to do it all yourself, but it's kind of nice to kind of politely highlight your weaknesses in a way and be able to kind of outsource them. And I also need to look at like financial modeling, because I haven't got like a business background necessarily. It's just good to kind of outline costings and yeah, just making sure that you're making it viable from the beginning. But yeah, really interesting and really well explained. Thank you.
Brill, thank you. Well, yeah, thanks everyone. I'm glad that was useful, and you took some handy sort of tips from it. Been a real pleasure spending this time with you, and good luck taking all of your initiatives forward. And as Gina says, maybe we'll cross paths again as part of one of the other FEA programs. But I think that is me. So I'll leave it there, Gina. I know you want to wrap up with a couple of final words.
Yes,
So
amazing. You're getting hearts and applause all around, James. You can come off mute if you want. I think this is sensational. Thank you, James. Fantastic. So I wrote in the chat the different sessions that are coming up to complement what James has done. He's basically outlined what is an organization, and the other sessions that have either happened, but a few that are happening, which I wrote in the chat earlier, will really complement this. So what legal structure should you choose, which will influence your financial sustainability? That's next week with BWB. Actually, what's your value proposition? How do you really do that in-depth problem research, both from a quant level, so how do you access government data, but also from a qualitative interview focus group way. So Jenny's going to break that down this afternoon. Heather's talking about funding tomorrow. So actually, how do you write great funding applications that will be successful? And of course, next week, we also have the 2 sessions with the current award winners. So you can find out about those questions from them, like what have they chosen for their legal structure? What has their journey been from senior leader into a social entrepreneurship angle? So lots for you to find out there. I'm going to leave us with a poll really quickly. So Emma, if you wouldn't mind drawing that up, we'd love to get your feedback. This is just a quick snapshot. We will be asking for feedback on the whole festival after the festival ends next Thursday. So if you could go ahead and just fill it out with your ratings for the session, your rating of the session lead, James, and then some of your favorite parts. Great. Thank you so much for filling that in. So as that comes, I want to just say thank you. I hope that you leave with one thing from my perspective, which is James' comment around partnerships. The business model canvas and the social business model canvas obviously highlights that at an early stage. So Elle, spot on. The early stage room, connect with each other, so there's lots of synergies already, and hopefully with the sessions that are open to everybody, whether that's I'm just trying to think, we have so many happening, but all the sessions in the pink room all of the FEA members, they're working on similar agendas. Connect with them as well, because those are the partners who might be able to bring you in to an existing thing already and really help you gain that credibility, which is often one of the hardest things at such an early stage. So make sure you're using the attendee list, connecting with others, and making the most of the festival. So thank you so much for joining. Hopefully we'll see you this afternoon at the problem research one or at another session throughout the festival. And thank you, James, so much. Excellent as always. We will send you a lifetime supply of chocolates as promised. Great. Thanks, everyone. Have great days.